Imagine waking up in the dead of night. The room feels unnaturally cold. You try to sit up, but your muscles they refuse to respond. You are completely paralyzed.
Oh, that is terrifying.
Right. And then, standing at the foot of your bed, you see it, like a dark, featureless figure just watching you.
Yeah, the classic nightmare.
Exactly. And for centuries, across virtually every culture on Earth, we called that a demon, or a succubus, a ghost. And we assumed it was entirely objectively real.
Because it feels real.
It does. But today, we know exactly what is happening inside the wet electrical circuitry of your brain to manufacture that exact experience.
It is both a terrifying and, honestly, a profoundly liberating realization. I mean,
Right.
we have this deep-seated assumption that our perception is like a high-end digital camera.
Like it's just recording.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We think the lens opens, the light comes in, and the brain prints a perfect objective photograph of reality. But when you step into the world of the supernatural, you realize that camera is actually a creative engine.
It's generating it.
Yes, it's not recording reality, it's aggressively editing it, generating it, and sometimes it's literally hallucinating it from scratch.
And that is exactly what we are tearing into today. Welcome to a brand new deep dive. We are incredibly excited to have you with us. Today we're looking at an absolutely fascinating stack of source material, mainly anchored by Richard Wiseman's brilliant book, Paranormality: Why We See What Isn't There.
Such a great read.
It really is. And our mission today is, well, it's a total perspective shift. We aren't here to debate the tired old question of, are ghosts or psychics real?
Right, that's been done.
Exactly. We are diving into something so much more interesting. Why did evolution build a brain that actively deceives us into seeing the supernatural?
Well, it requires us to really look under the hood of our own neurobiology and psychology because to understand why someone sees a ghost or believes a psychic, you really have to understand the cognitive software that keeps us alive. Wiseman's work is dense and it's revealing. And the way we're going to tackle this, because it's so layered, is by breaking it down section by section using a rigorous 5-part analytical framework.
I love the structure. Walk us through it.
So for each topic, we'll look at number 1, the core premise, what's the main idea. Number 2, the conceptual link, so how it connects to the previous idea. Number 3, the evidence, real data.
The fun stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Number 4, critical observation, looking at the underlying assumptions. And finally, number 5, the main takeaway.
Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with a concept the book tackles right out of the gate, which is the illusion of coincidence and this bizarre phenomenon of animal magic.
Oh, this is a great starting point.
Because before we can talk about, like, floating outside our bodies or talking to the dead, we have to establish a baseline, right? And the core premise here, the baseline, is that human beings are obsessive meaning-making machines. Our beliefs don't just sit passively in our brains waiting for data. They actively filter and shape how we see the world.
Precisely. They filter the data before it ever even reaches your conscious awareness.
Reading this, I instantly thought of a social media algorithm.
Oh, that's a perfect conceptual link.
Right. If you engage with one specific type of video, say you watch one clip of a guy restoring a rusty knife, the algorithm says, oh, they love rusty knives, and it feeds you 50 more, while aggressively hiding videos about, I don't know, baking or sports.
It curates your feed.
Exactly. And your brain does the exact same thing with reality. If you believe in something, your brain's algorithm serves you up the slice of reality that confirms it. And Wiseman illustrates this perfectly with the evidence of JT, the quote-unquote psychic terrier.
The famous JD.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever owned a dog that just seemed to know exactly when you were coming home?
It's an incredibly common experience for pet owners, actually. And JD was the ultimate example. I mean, this dog was making global headlines in the 1990s. The owner, this woman in the UK, was absolutely convinced that her dog had a psychic connection to her. She claimed that the exact moment she decided to head home, even if she was miles and miles away, JD would go sit by the window and wait for her.
Which sounds like an ironclad case of animal telepathy.
It really does. And the news media completely ate it up.
Because on TV, they show the owner saying, I'm going home, and then they cut to the dog running to the window, and you think, wow, magic.
Right, the editing is doing the heavy lifting there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I love what happens when real scientists actually show up. Wiseman and his team went to test JD. And they didn't just film the highlights. What did they actually do?
Well, they applied rigorous, continuous observation. They set up synchronized cameras. One fixed permanently on the owner, who was instructed to return at a randomly generated time.
So she couldn't just have a routine.
Exactly. And the other camera was fixed continuously on the dog at the window. And when you look at the unedited, continuous data, the miracle completely evaporates.
Poof. Gone.
Yeah. JD's supposed hits were nothing more than statistical noise amidst a sea of misses.
I mean, he was at the window constantly. The book describes him running to the window because a car drove by, or because a dog was in heat down the street.
Yeah.
During one specific trial, JD made 8 separate, distinct trips to the window.
Right, just doing normal dog things.
And one of those trips just happened to vaguely coincide with the owner setting off for home. But the kicker is, he only stayed at the window for a few seconds before running out into the garden and literally vomiting on the researcher's shoes.
Which is hardly a majestic display of psychic connection.
No, not at all.
But this highlights the critical observation here. The underlying assumption humans make is that a gut feeling equals objective reality. The owner wasn't lying. She genuinely believed her dog was psychic. But she was systematically ignoring all the misses, the dozens of times JD went to the window when she wasn't coming home. She only remembered the hits.
Wait, I have to push back a little here. I mean, it's easy to laugh at the dog owner, but we all do this, don't we?
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the last time you thought of a friend you haven't spoken to in months, and suddenly your phone buzzes and it's a text from them.
Yes.
You feel that chill down your spine. You think, we are psychically linked. But we completely ignore the thousands of times we thought of a friend, and the phone just stayed completely silent.
Exactly. So the main takeaway for this first section is bold and simple. We are hardwired to remember the hits and forget the misses, making random coincidences feel like supernatural destiny.
It's so true.
And because evolutionary biology favored noticing patterns, even false ones, to keep us alive, this cognitive bias leads to profound misinterpretations of random data today. Wiseman highlights another brilliant, if slightly unsettling, example of this evidence. The Chapman's Draw a Person test from 1967.
This one blew my mind, because it wasn't just everyday people making mistakes, it was clinical psychologists.
Yes, highly trained professionals.
Explain what the Chapmans did here.
Okay, so in the 1960s, a popular diagnostic tool in psychiatry was asking patients to draw a picture of a person. Clinicians firmly believed that certain drawing traits correlated with specific psychological conditions.
Okay.
For example, they believed that if a patient drew a person with atypically large, emphasized eyes, it was an indicator of paranoia.
Which intuitively makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Paranoia equals feeling watched, therefore large eyes.
It sounds totally logical,
Yeah.
but the Chapmans wanted to see if that link was actually real or just an illusion. So they gathered a group of students and gave them hundreds of random pairings of patient drawings and psychiatric symptom descriptions.
Okay, random pairings.
Right. And here's the crucial part. The Chapmans mathematically ensured there was absolutely zero correlation in the materials they handed out. The drawings with large eyes were randomly paired with depression, with anxiety, with paranoia, with completely normal profiles.
So the data they were looking at contained no actual pattern.
None. Zero. But when they asked the students afterward what patterns they observed, the students overwhelmingly reported finding the exact clinical correlations they expected to find.
They hallucinated the math.
Exactly. They confidently stated that the drawings with large eyes were frequently paired with paranoia. They saw a pattern that literally did not exist in the data simply because their brains expected to see it.
And the text brings up an even more relatable example of this, the link between arthritis pain and the weather.
Oh, everyone knows someone who claims this.
Right. If you're listening to this, you probably know someone, or maybe you are someone, who swears their bad knee can predict a rainstorm. For centuries, people have claimed that cold, damp weather causes flare-ups in joint pain.
So Donald Rettelmeyer, a medical researcher, and Amos Tversky, a legendary cognitive psychologist, decided to test this in the mid-1990s. They had a group of arthritis patients meticulously track their pain levels twice a month for over a year.
That's a lot of data.
And then they took that pain data and cross-referenced it with incredibly precise meteorological data for the exact same time periods: barometric pressure, humidity, temperature.
And let me guess. The statistical correlation was zero.
Absolutely zero. The weather had no objective impact on the patient's pain levels whatsoever. But, and this is the fascinating part, when interviewed, the patients were completely, unshakably convinced the link existed.
How does that happen? How can your own physical pain deceive you like that?
It comes back to that hit and miss ratio. When your knee hurts and it's raining outside, your brain goes, aha, I knew it. The rain causes the pain. That's a hit.
Right.
Gets locked into your long-term memory. But when your knee hurts and it's a beautifully sunny 75-degree day, your brain just ignores the weather entirely. It doesn't register as a miss.
Wow.
And when it's raining but your knee doesn't hurt, you aren't paying attention to your knee at all. So the only data points your brain saves are the ones that confirm the hypothesis.
Okay, so this creates a perfect transition to section 2. Because it's one thing to have your brain naturally fool itself. But what happens when someone else understands this psychological glitch and actively weaponizes it against you?
Now we enter the dark arts.
Exactly. That brings us to the world of fortune-telling, mediums, and the art of cold reading.
Yes. So the core premise here is that psychics and mediums use universal psychological biases to make clients feel as though their deepest, most intimately specific secrets are being revealed.
I was trying to come up with an analogy for cold reading, and I realized it is exactly like a one-size-fits-all t-shirt made out of memory foam.
Oh, I like that.
Think about it. When it's hanging on the rack, it looks totally generic, almost shapeless. But the moment you put it on, the material magically conforms to your exact physical contours, making you think, wow, this was tailored specifically for me. But the shirt didn't do anything. Your body provided the shape.
That is a brilliant conceptual link. Building directly on our brain's desire to find patterns, professional charlatans exploit that exact filtering. The psychic is providing the memory foam, but the client is providing the specific shape.
Exactly.
And to prove this, as evidence, Wiseman introduces us to the ultimate skeptic, the late great magician James Randi.
A legend.
Truly. Randi famously offered a $1 million prize to anyone who could demonstrate supernatural abilities under scientifically controlled conditions.
And a medium named Patricia Putt actually took him up on it. She claims she could contact the spirits of the dead to divine highly specific information about the living. She really thought she was the real deal. So how did they test her?
Well, to test a psychic legitimately, you have to completely eliminate visual and social cues. The feedback loop is the psychic's lifeblood. So Randy's team set up an incredibly strict protocol. They brought in 10 volunteers.
Okay.
These volunteers were instructed to wear full-length black capes and thick black balaclavas covering their entire faces, leaving only their eyes exposed.
Just picture the absurdity of this scene for a second. 10 people dressed like medieval executioners sitting in a room to get their fortunes told.
It was necessary. They had to prevent Putt from reading their body language, their age, their style of dress, anything that could give her a clue.
Right.
The volunteers sat facing the wall, completely silent. Putt gave a reading for each of them, purportedly contacting spirits relevant to each specific cloaked individual. After all 10 readings were done, the transcripts were typed up, completely anonymized, and handed back to the volunteers.
And logically, if she is actually talking to your dead grandfather, she is going to relay things that only apply to you, like your grandfather says he mixes the smell of your cherry tobacco, or something wildly specific. So the volunteers should easily be able to read 10 transcripts and say, oh, number 4 is definitely mine.
Exactly.
What happened?
When evaluated blindly, stripped of the emotional context and the in-the-moment performance, not a single volunteer could correctly identify their own reading. 0 out of 10.
Wow.
The $1 million remains safe.
Because without the psychic looking at your face, reading your microexpressions, and adjusting their script on the fly, the illusion completely shatters.
Precisely.
And the book goes deep into how this is done, introducing a professional psychic named Mr. D, who outlines the specific, manipulative techniques of a cold reading. Let's break these down, because they're terrifyingly effective. The first is something psychologists call the Lake Wobegon effect.
Right. Named after Garrison Keillor's fictional town where all the women are strong, all the men are good-looking, and all the children are above average.
Which is impossible.
Exactly. It refers to our egocentric bias. We all fundamentally believe we possess more positive traits than the average person. Mr. D exploited this through sheer, calculated flattery. He would say things like, "You have a great deal of unused creative potential," or "You are generally very intuitive even if others don't realize it."
And because we all desperately want to believe we are secretly creative geniuses, our brains just nod along and accept it as profound insight.
We swallow it hook, line, and sinker.
But if they only say nice things, it sounds fake. So then they use the Dartmouth Indians versus Princeton Tigers effect. What is the mechanism behind this one?
This one is fascinating. It's named after a notoriously brutal 1951 college football game between Dartmouth and Princeton. It was incredibly rough, with many injuries. Afterward, psychologists showed the exact same film footage of the game to students from both schools.
And let me guess, they saw two different games.
Completely. The Princeton students saw a game where Dartmouth played dirty, and the Dartmouth students saw a game where Princeton was the aggressor. They selectively processed the exact same objective footage to support their pre-existing allegiances.
So how does a psychic use that?
By delivering double-headed, inherently contradictory statements.
Yeah.
A psychic will look you in the eye and say, you are a highly sensitive and empathetic person, but you also have a ruthless streak when you need to protect yourself.
Oh, that's clever.
Or you tend to be the life of the party, but you also deeply cherish your quiet, solitary moments.
Ah, I see. It covers all the bases. But how does the client not realize they're just being fed contradictions?
Because of that cognitive filtering we discussed earlier, the client's brain simply deletes the half of the sentence that doesn't fit their self-image and focuses entirely on the half that does.
So if you are an introvert, you hear cherish solitary moments and think the psychic is peering right into your soul, you completely forget they also called you the life of the party.
Exactly. It's confirmation bias in real time.
That is so manipulative. And then there's the coup de grace, the Dr. Fox and Eliza effect.
Sure.
Tell me about Dr. Fox first, because this is hilarious.
Dr. Fox was a brilliant psychological experiment in the 1970s. Researchers hired an actor, dressed him up, gave him an impressive fake academic resume, and had him deliver a lecture to a room full of highly educated professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers.
The toughest audience.
Right. And the lecture was completely fabricated nonsense. It was full of contradictory statements, non sequiturs, and vague academic jargon.
And the highly educated audience saw right through him, right?
Wrong. They rated his lecture as incredibly stimulating and profound. Because he delivered it with authority and charisma, the audience's brains worked overtime to find deep meaning in the gibberish.
And the text pairs this with Eliza, which was one of the very first computer programs to simulate conversation back in the 1960s. It was essentially a rudimentary chatbot that just took whatever you typed and turned it around as a question.
Right.
You'd type, I am sad, and Eliza would type, why do you think you were sad? People became deeply emotionally attached to this computer program, convinced it possessed deep empathy.
Exactly. When you combine Dr. Fox and Eliza, you get the ultimate psychic technique. The psychic delivers vague, ambiguous drivel like, I see a change concerning property, or there is a man with a dark aura affecting your energy. And the client's brain auto-fills that vague framework with profound, specific personal meaning.
They connect the dots to their own impending lease renewal or their difficult boss. So, wait, let me pause you here because I have a hard time wrapping my head around this.
Yeah.
Are we saying the client is just gullible? Is the psychic actively laughing at them internally?
No, it's not about gullibility at all. It's about how human empathy and pattern recognition are naturally structured. The critical observation here, that the assumption the client makes is that the psychic is transmitting specific information. But the alternative perspective is that the client is doing 100% of the heavy lifting.
They're just a blank canvas.
Yes. The psychic throws out an empty hook, and the client furiously reels themselves in, doing all the emotional and intellectual labor to construct a narrative.
So the main takeaway for Section 2. Psychic readings are masterpieces of psychological manipulation, relying entirely on the client's brain to construct meaning from ambiguous flattery.
Perfectly stated.
That is wild. But okay, let's take this a step further. It is one thing to have a con artist manipulate your psychology from the outside, using clever wordplay. But what happens when the deception comes from inside your own nervous system?
Yes, when your physical body starts lying to you.
Exactly. Which brings us to Section 3. The illusory soul and out-of-body experiences, or OBEs.
This is a profound shift in our investigation, because an out-of-body experience feels like the ultimate, undeniable proof of the supernatural. The core premise is that people report floating near the ceiling, looking down at their own physical bodies lying on a bed or an operating table.
It's a very common report.
Very common. And to the person experiencing it, it feels like definitive proof that the soul is a distinct, ethereal entity that can detach from the meat suit of the body.
And for over a century, people desperately tried to prove that physically. The book talks about this macabre history. We have to talk about Dr. Duncan McDougall. This is early 1900s, right? What was his experiment?
So McDougall was a physician who firmly believed the soul had physical mass. So in 1907, he constructed a specialized bed attached to a giant, highly sensitive industrial scale. He sought out patients who were in the terminal stages of tuberculosis because the disease causes extreme physical exhaustion, meaning the patients would die quietly without thrashing around and disturbing the scale.
It is so dark.
It really is. He would literally place a dying human being on this scale and wait for the exact moment of death.
And he claimed that at the exact moment of passing, the scale registered a sudden, inexplicable drop in weight, 21 grams.
Yes. He famously claimed those 21 grams were the weight of the soul departing the physical vessel. It became a huge cultural phenomenon.
But Wiseman points out the science was completely bogus, right?
Entirely flawed. Later analysis revealed that the weight loss was likely due to a sudden drop in core body temperature, causing a momentary surge in sweat evaporation, combined with air leaving the lungs and blood cooling artifacts.
So just biology.
Just biology. Furthermore, McDougall only got that 21-gram result on one single patient out of his sample, and he threw out the data from the others because it didn't fit his hypothesis.
Oh, that's terrible science.
And he even tried it on dogs and found no weight loss, which he used to claim dogs don't have souls. But he poisoned the dogs himself, meaning their deaths were completely different physiologically.
Wow. Okay, so McDougall fails. Then the text mentions Hippolyte Baraduc, a French physician who tried to photograph the soul leaving the body. He produced these glass plate negatives showing a wispy, ethereal white mist hovering over his recently deceased wife and son.
It looked terrifyingly real to people back then.
Until photographic experts examined his equipment and realized his camera bellows were riddled with tiny pinholes, allowing stray light to leak onto the negatives, creating those ghostly, misty artifacts.
Right. The physical search for the soul was a total dead end.
But the psychological search, that yielded absolute gold. And to understand the conceptual link here, how the brain's internal map can be hacked, I need to use an analogy.
Go for it.
Think about the GPS app on your smartphone. It doesn't inherently know where it is. It has to constantly calculate you are here by synthesizing data pings from multiple satellites.
Right.
If you drive into a long concrete tunnel and lose those satellite pings, the GPS software panics. The blue dot on your screen starts jumping around, and suddenly it shows your car floating in the middle of a river 3 miles away. Your brain works exactly the same way.
That is a perfect encapsulation of modern neuroscientific theory regarding the self. The feeling that you are located inside your physical body, specifically right behind your eyes, is not a spiritual absolute. It is an active, continuous neurological computation.
So it's constantly updating.
Constantly. Your brain is synthesizing satellite pings your vision, your sense of touch, and your proprioception, which is your internal sense of where your limbs are in space.
So an out-of-body experience is literally just the brain driving into a tunnel and losing the signal.
Exactly. Researcher Sue Blackmore has spent her career studying this. She found evidence that OBEs consistently happen when normal sensory input is drastically cut off or disrupted, like during sleep paralysis, extreme trauma, near-death medical crises, or under anesthesia.
When the pings stop.
Yes. When the brain is starved of its normal spatial data, the computational software crashes. But the brain hates a vacuum. So it desperately tries to construct a new reality based on memory and expectation, often visualizing the scene from a disembodied bird's eye view, because that is how we naturally construct mental maps.
Okay, I conceptually get that. But Wiseman details an experiment in the book that physically proves this, and it is honestly one of the wildest things I've ever read. Bigne Langenhager's virtual reality experiment. Walk me through exactly how she hacked the human soul.
Oh, this experiment is a masterpiece of cognitive hacking. Langenhager brought participants into a lab and had them put on a virtual reality headset. But instead of a computer-generated video game, the headset displayed a live camera feed. The camera was positioned a few feet directly behind the participant.
So when I put the headset on, I am looking at my own back, standing a few feet in front of me, like I am a ghost standing by myself.
Yes. That alone is wildly disorienting. But then she adds the crucial element, tactile synchrony. The researcher takes a stick and begins gently stroking the participant's actual physical back.
Okay.
At the exact same time, in the live video feed, the participant sees the stick stroking the back of their virtual avatar.
So I am feeling a touch on my real back, but my eyes are seeing that touch happen to a body 3 feet in front of me.
Precisely. And what happens next is extraordinary. Because the visual data and the tactile data are perfectly synchronized, the brain's spatial processing center, the temporoparietal junction, becomes incredibly confused.
It has to resolve the conflict.
And vision almost always overrides touch. After just a few minutes of this synchronized stroking, the participants' brains updated their internal GPS coordinates. They began to physically, viscerally feel their sense of self, drift out of their actual physical bodies, and relocate into the virtual avatar standing in front of them.
Wait, really? They literally felt like they were inhabiting the body they were looking at.
Yes. To prove it, the researchers would suddenly threaten the virtual avatar like swinging a hammer toward the camera lens. The participants' actual physical bodies would exhibit a massive stress response, sweating and flinching, because their brain genuinely believed, I am located where the avatar is.
That is absolutely staggering.
What's fascinating here is the critical observation. Historically, researchers assumed consciousness required a physical, detachable vessel, like a soul. This ignores the modern neuroscientific view that identity and spatial location are purely sensory computations.
So the main takeaway for Section 3. Out-of-body experiences are not the soul leaving the body, but rather the brain's internal mapping system temporarily crashing when deprived of normal sensory data.
Exact.
Which logically leads us to a terrifying question. If our internal mapping system can crash that easily, what about our external perception of reality? How vulnerable are our eyes and our memories?
Very vulnerable.
Right. If I can't even trust my brain to know where my body is, how can I trust my eyes when they see someone move an object with their mind? This brings us to Section 4, mind over matter and inattentional blindness. We've established the brain as a bad GPS. Now we establish it's an even worse video camera.
The core premise here is that our visual field feels continuous, like a panoramic movie. But it is actually a highly edited highlight reel. We completely miss glaringly obvious physical actions if our attention is misdirected for even a fraction of a second.
I picture it like a spotlight in a dark theater. You only see the actor the light hits. You completely miss the stagehands dressed in black, moving heavy props just inches away in the dark. Your brain just edits the stagehands out of existence.
A perfect analogy.
And the masters of controlling that spotlight are magicians and fake psychics. Let's talk about the evidence here. James Allen Heydrich. Who is this guy?
Heydrich was a fascinating character in the early 1980s. He presented himself as a martial arts master who had learned profound psychokinetic powers in a remote temple. He went on national television and performed seemingly impossible feats.
Like what?
He would place a pencil on the edge of a table, stand back, stare at it intensely, and the pencil would slowly spin around. He could take a thick telephone directory, focus his mind, and the pages would literally turn themselves.
He looked incredibly convincing. He had this intense, vein-popping stare. But James Randi and an investigator named Danny Corum suspected he wasn't using his mind. He was using his lungs.
Yes. They suspected Heydrich was simply blowing on the objects. But the mystery was, how is he blowing hard enough to turn a phone book page without anyone seeing his mouth move or hearing the breath?
Right, because the camera's right on his face. So how did they expose him?
Randy set up a trap on live television. He placed small foam-packing peanuts all around the phone book. If Heydrich was blowing, the air current would disturb the lightweight peanuts before turning the heavier page. Heydrich sat there for an hour, sweating, claiming his powers were drained, and completely failed to perform the trick. But Corum went deeper and analyzed Heydrich's technique. Heydrich was using a physiological loophole called saccadic masking.
Saccadic masking.
Uh-huh.
Explain that mechanism, because that is wild.
When your eyes dart from one point to another a saccade, your brain actually shuts off the visual feed for a few milliseconds to prevent motion blur. Heydrich would wait for a moment of tension, briefly glance away from the book, make a sudden, sharp, highly focused exhalation through his teeth, and then immediately snap his eyes back to the book.
And the audience instinctively followed his gaze.
Exactly. In that split second of eye movement, their brains literally stopped recording. A moment later, the delayed air current hit the page, and the page turned.
And because his glance away seemed completely unimportant, the audience's brain simply hit the delete key on that data. They remembered him staring intently and the book turning itself by magic. They edited out the actual cause.
Exactly, and this isn't a new trick. Wiseman links this directly to the fake seances of the 1880s, specifically the work of S.J. Davy.
Oh, the slate writing.
Yeah, Davy was a magician who wanted to prove how unreliable human memory is in supernatural settings. He would hold seances and produce spirit messages on chalk slates. He would lock a blank slate in a box, and moments later, it would be covered in writing.
Okay, but surely, if you are a highly intelligent observer sitting right next to him, you would catch him swapping the slates.
You would think so. Davy invited members of the Society for Psychical Research, highly educated, skeptical investigators, to his seances. Afterward, he asked them to write down a detailed chronological account of exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Their eyewitness testimonies were wildly, hopelessly inaccurate. They would confidently swear that Davy never touched the slate or that the slate was locked away long before it actually was. Davy used misdirection to perform the swap, and the witnesses' brains simply omitted the moments of misdirection from their memory entirely.
It is terrifying to think our memories can be corrupted that easily. And Wiseman uses a famous criminology study to hammer this home. Professor von List's classroom experiment. What did he do to his students?
Professor von List wanted to test eyewitness testimony in high-stress situations. He staged a massive disruption during his university lecture. 2 students, actors he had hired, suddenly stood up and began violently arguing. The argument escalated. One student drew a revolver and fired a shot in the classroom. Total panic ensued.
It sounds incredibly traumatic.
It was. Once order was restored, von List revealed the deception and asked the terrified students to immediately write down a detailed account of the perpetrator and the exact sequence of events. Despite the fact that the event had just occurred right in front of their eyes, the reports were riddled with massive errors.
Like what kind of errors?
They invented dialogue that was never spoken, they misidentified the shooter, they got the sequence of the physical altercation completely backwards.
Have you ever sworn to your partner that you remember exactly how an argument started, only to realize later you were totally wrong? It's the same thing.
Exactly.
The critical observation here, the assumption we make, is that our eyes are objective cameras and our memory is a secure hard drive. But the truth is that the brain constantly makes assumptions about what is unimportant, deletes that data, and then seamlessly fills in the gaps with fabrications to make a coherent story.
So the main takeaway for Section 4. Supernatural feats of psychokinesis are merely demonstrations of how easily human attention can be hijacked and our memories corrupted.
All right, this next transition is where things get truly bizarre. We have established that our perception can be hacked, our spatial awareness can be tricked, and our memory can be corrupted. But what about our physical muscles? What happens when our own bodies start moving without our permission? This brings us to Section 5. Talking with the dead and unconscious action.
This is perhaps the most uncomfortable truth Wiseman explores. The core premise here is that human beings are fully capable of performing incredibly complex, deliberate physical actions entirely without conscious awareness or intent.
I use the highway hypnosis analogy for this. Have you ever been driving a familiar route, say, commuting home from work, and you get lost in thought? Suddenly, you are pulling into your driveway, and you realize you have absolutely zero conscious memory of driving the last 5 miles.
I think everyone has experienced that.
You stopped at red lights, you navigated turns, you merged with traffic, all while the conscious you was entirely absent. Your physical body executed a highly complex series of movements on complete autopilot.
It beautifully illustrates the massive, automated processing power of the unconscious mind. The brain is incredibly efficient. It offloads routine tasks to the basal ganglia so the frontal cortex can focus on higher-order thinking. But in the context of the supernatural, this automated processing can create terrifying illusions.
Because it explains how these spirits, moving objects around the room during a seance, are actually just our own hidden muscle movements.
Yes. To prove this, Wiseman takes us back to the 19th century, to the height of the spiritualist movement, and introduces an experiment by Michael Faraday.
Now, Faraday is a titan of physics, the man who discovered electromagnetic induction. Why was a genius physicist investigating haunted tables?
Because table turning was an absolute craze in Victorian society. Groups of people would gather in dimly lit parlors, place their hands flat on top of a heavy wooden table, and wait. After a while, the table would begin to vibrate, tilt, and even violently spin across the room, supposedly pushed by the spirits of the dead.
And highly intelligent people believed it was undeniable proof of the afterlife.
They did, but Faraday wasn't having it. He suspected a purely physical, biomechanical cause. But how do you prove that people are pushing a table when they passionately swear they aren't?
Right, because they really believed they weren't doing it. So what did he do?
He devised an incredibly clever physical trap, a subtle diagnostic tool. He took several layers of thick cardboard and glued them together using a soft, viscous cement. He placed these layered cardboard pads on top of the table. He then drew a vertical pencil line down the edge, marking all the layers.
Okay.
He instructed the seance participants to place their hands on top of the cardboard, not directly on the wood.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It's simple physics. If a spirit was moving the table from underneath, the table would move first, dragging the bottom layers of cardboard with it, and the top layers where the hands rested would lag behind.
Oh,
But if the
brilliant.
people were unconsciously pushing the table, their hands would move the top layers of cardboard first, and the bottom layers would drag behind.
He created a mechanical lie detector. What were the results?
The results were definitive and undeniable. Every single time the table moved, the pencil marks showed that the top layers of cardboard had slid forward first. The sitter's hands were initiating the movement. Faraday had scientifically proven that the people were pushing the table themselves.
Wait, hold on. I find it really hard to believe that 4 adults could push a heavy wooden table across a parlor floor and genuinely not feel their own muscles flexing. Are we saying they were lying, or is their brain literally blocking the physical sensation?
They were absolutely not lying. This is the crucial point. They were experiencing what is called ideomotor action. William Carpenter, a physiologist, coined the term. The principle is that the mere thought or expectation of a movement causes the brain to subtly send neurological signals to the muscles to prepare for that movement.
Without you even knowing it.
Yes, if you sit at a table expecting it to spin to the left, your brain automatically, beneath the threshold of conscious awareness, begins contracting the muscles in your arms to push left.
But the spiritualists fought back.
Right.
They argued, Mr. Faraday, we try our absolute hardest not to push the table. We actively resist. How does the text explain that?
Wiseman brings in the work of Harvard psychologist Dan Wegner to explain the paradoxical nature of suppression. Wegner is famous for the white bear rebound effect. He proved that if you instruct someone to explicitly not think of a white bear, their brain must continually monitor itself to ensure it isn't thinking of the bear.
Which means they keep thinking of it.
Ironically, yes, this monitoring process keeps the concept of the white bear highly active in the mind.
So trying to suppress a thought actually amplifies it. How does that apply to muscles?
Wegner tested this with physical movement. He gave participants a pendulum, a weight on a string. He told them to hold it perfectly still over a target, but instructed them to try their hardest not to let it swing back and forth along a specific axis.
Let me guess. The moment they tried not to swing it, it started swinging.
Exactly. The intense mental focus on preventing the specific movement caused the ideomotor system to accidentally execute that exact movement. So when the Victorian spiritualists tried desperately not to push the table, their mental focus on pushing ironically caused their unconscious muscles to push even harder.
This mechanism is incredible, but the text shows it scales up to a level that is frankly hard to believe. We aren't just talking about pushing tables or swinging pendulums. We are talking about complex creative works, the phenomenon of automatic writing. Tell me about Pearl Curran and Patience Worth.
This is a wild story. Pearl Curran was an ordinary housewife in St. Louis in the early 1900s. She had an 8th grade education and no literary ambitions, but she started playing with a Ouija board and eventually began dictating incredibly complex, critically acclaimed novels and poetry.
Whole novels.
Yes. She claimed the words were being given to her by the spirit of a 17th century Englishwoman named Patience Worth.
I mean, from an uneducated housewife, it's easy to see why people thought it had to be a ghost.
Yes, and she wasn't the only one. The text also mentions Emily Grant Hutchings, who claimed to receive dictation through a Ouija board from the ghost of Mark Twain, resulting in a novel called Jap Heron.
Mark Twain's ghost.
It was so heavily publicized that Mark Twain's actual earthly publisher, Harper & Brothers, sued Hutchings to protect his earthly copyrights from his ghostly output.
That is hilarious. The court's having to decide if a ghost owns copyright. But the point Wiseman is making is that these women weren't intentionally faking it, right?
Precisely. They genuinely did not feel themselves authoring the work. Their frontal cortex, the conscious eye, was disengaged. The creative heavy lifting was being done entirely by the massive automated processing networks of their unconscious minds, accessing repressed memories, vocabulary, and linguistic patterns they didn't consciously know they possessed.
So the critical observation here shatters a core human assumption, the illusion of free will. We believe we consciously authorize and orchestrate every single movement our body makes and every word we speak. We completely ignore that we are riding on top of a massive, automated, unconscious machine.
So the main takeaway for Section 5, seances, automatic writing, and Ouija boards are not portals to the afterlife, but powerful demonstrations of our own unconscious mind directing physical movement.
Which seamlessly sets the stage for Section 6, where Wiseman brings all of these threads together. We've talked about how our perception filters data, how our internal GPS can crash, how our memory deletes anomalies, and how our unconscious moves our bodies.
Right.
What happens when you combine all those ingredients in a dark, creepy environment? You get ghost hunting.
Yes. Ghost hunting, suggestion, and the brain's hardware. The core premise here is that environmental factors and simple psychological suggestion can trigger profound, terrifying, and seemingly supernatural sensory experiences.
I like to think of the human brain as a hypersensitive smoke alarm. It is evolutionarily designed to go off at the absolute slightest hint of danger in the environment, which means it frequently screams at you just because you burnt some toast, not because the house is actually burning down.
A very apt analogy. The brain prioritizes survival over accuracy. And to understand how this creates ghosts, Wiseman looks at the physical environment. He details the famous God helmet experiments conducted by Michael Persinger.
What was the God helmet?
Persinger was a neuroscientist who believed that supernatural experiences, feeling a presence in a room, seeing angels, seeing ghosts, were actually caused by minor seizures in the temporal lobes of the brain triggered by environmental electromagnetic fields.
So he thought ghosts were just ambient electricity messing with our wetware. How did he test it?
He built a modified motorcycle helmet fitted with solenoids. He would put participants in a sensory deprivation chamber, complete darkness, absolute silence, place the helmet on their heads, and beam weak, complex magnetic fields directly into their temporal lobes.
Okay.
The results were astounding. Participants routinely reported feeling an invisible presence in the room, feeling physical touches, and some even reported having direct conversations with God. Persinger argued he had found the physical on switch for the supernatural.
It sounds like definitive scientific proof. Electricity equals ghosts. But then a Swedish researcher came along and ruined the party, right?
Yes. Per Gronqvist, a researcher in Sweden decided to replicate the God helmet experiment. But he added one crucial element that Persinger lacked: a rigorous double-blind protocol.
Ah, the gold standard.
Gronqvist put the helmet on the participants, put them in the dark room, and suggested they might feel strange sensations. But for half of the participants, he never actually turned the magnetic fields on. The helmet was completely dead.
Oh, wow. And what did the control group feel?
Both groups, the ones getting zapped with magnets and the ones sitting with a dead helmet, reported the exact same rate of profound, ghostly sensations.
So the maggots were doing nothing.
Absolutely nothing. The entire phenomenon was driven by the sensory deprivation chamber and the sheer psychological suggestion of wearing a brain-altering helmet.
Power of suggestion is terrifying. And Wiseman provides another great simple example of this. James Horan's peppermint experiment.
Right. Horan gathered a group of people in a room and told them he was testing a newly developed, highly potent synthetic peppermint dye. He said he was going to spray it into the air and asked participants to raise their hands the moment they detected the minty odor.
Okay.
He sprayed a canister, and slowly, hands began to go up across the room. People described the fresh, crisp smell of peppermint filling their nostrils.
But there was no peppermint.
None. The canister contained only pure water and odorless food coloring. Their brains literally manufactured the olfactory sensation of smelling mint entirely based on the expectation that they should be smelling it.
And Chris French proved this works for haunted houses too, right? With the Haunt Project.
Exactly. French built a completely featureless, circular white room. He rigged it with hidden speakers playing low-frequency infrasound and coils generating complex electromagnetic fields, trying to recreate the spooky environmental variables often found in alleged haunted houses. He brought participants in and told them they might experience unusual sensations.
Let me guess. The suggestion did more than the technology.
By far. The environmental tweaks had a very minor impact, but the psychological suggestion that the room was designed to elicit haunted feelings caused a massive spike in participants reporting chills down their spine, feelings of dread, and the sense of an invisible presence.
So why are our brains so eager to invent a ghost just because someone suggests a room is spooky? Wiseman introduces a concept here that I think is the key to the whole book: the hypersensitive agency detection device, or HADD. Explain the evolutionary biology behind this.
HADD is a pure evolutionary survival mechanism. Imagine our ancient ancestors walking through the tall grass on the African savanna. Suddenly, they hear a rustling sound. They have two choices. They can assume the rustling is caused by the wind, a non-living, non-intentional force, or they can assume the rustling is caused by a hidden leopard, a living agent with the intent to eat them.
If you assume it's the wind and you're wrong, you get eaten. You die. Your genes are removed from the pool.
Precisely. But if you assume it's a leopard and you're wrong, you just get a rush of adrenaline and run away. You survive to breed. Therefore, evolution aggressively selected for a brain that is profoundly biased toward detecting agency, living intention, even when none exists. We are hardwired to project human-like intent onto meaningless environmental noise.
And the text references a classic 1940s psychology experiment by Hyder and Simmel to prove how deep this projection goes. They created a simple, primitive cartoon. It was just a large triangle, a small triangle, and a circle moving randomly around a box on a screen. There was no plot, no faces, just geometric shapes sliding around.
But when they asked people to describe what they saw in the video, almost no one said, "I saw shapes moving randomly." Instead, they instantly invented a complex social drama. They said, the big, aggressive triangle is bullying the circle, and the brave little triangle is fighting back to save it.
Wow.
The human brain cannot tolerate random, meaningless motion. It forces a narrative of intent, emotion, and agency onto everything it sees.
So if you are sitting in an old, drafty house at midnight and a floorboard creaks, your HADD mechanism kicks in. Your brain doesn't say thermal expansion of wood. It says something is sneaking up on me.
Right.
The critical observation here is that we assume raw physiological sensations, like the hair standing up on our arms or a chill down our spine, must be a reaction to an external objective cause. We ignore the sheer power of our own evolutionary hypervigilance.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the main takeaway for Section 6 is ghosts are born from a potent mix of environmental suggestion and our evolutionary hardwiring to detect human intention where none exists.
Which brings us to the final and perhaps most consequential stage of Wiseman's analysis. We move from individual spooky experiences to mass societal movements. Section 7, cults, prophecy, and the pattern-seeking mind.
This is where it gets serious.
Yeah. The core premise here is that our drive to find cause and effect relationships is so overpowering, so utterly dominant in our cognition, that we will invent patterns to justify random tragedies, predictive dreams, or even extreme self-destructive cult beliefs.
It is the ultimate culmination of the deep dive. Why do we fall for psychics, ghosts, and moving tables? Because the exact same pattern recognition software that allows us to learn and survive also drives us into the arms of the supernatural.
It reminds me of staring at the clouds. At first, you know it is just random water vapor. But if you stare long enough and want it badly enough, your brain forces you to see a face. And once you see the face, you can't unsee it.
And when that pattern recognition software is hijacked by a charismatic leader, the results can be catastrophic. Wiseman examines the psychological mechanics of cults. He looks at Jim Jones and the People's Temple. How does a leader convince hundreds of people to willingly give up their lives? It isn't instant brainwashing. It relies on the foot-in-the-door technique combined with our desperate need for internal consistency.
Right. Jim Jones started by asking for tiny, harmless commitments. Attend a meeting, then donate a little money, then spend your weekends working for the church. It is a slow, gradual escalation.
Exactly. And once a person has made a significant commitment, a powerful psychological force takes over: cognitive dissonance. Wiseman highlights Leon Festinger's legendary study of Marion Keech's UFO cult in the 1950s.
Oh, this is a crazy story.
Keech claimed to be receiving messages from aliens on the planet Clarion. She prophesied that a massive flood would destroy the world on a specific date at midnight, but a flying saucer would arrive to rescue her true believers.
The believers quit their jobs, gave away their money, and gathered in her living room on the night of the apocalypse. And midnight came and went. No saucer, no flood, just silence.
Logically, as an outside observer, you would expect them to realize they had been fooled, pack up, and go home.
Right.
But Festinger, who had infiltrated the group, observed the exact opposite. The pain of admitting they had destroyed their lives for a lie was too neurologically overwhelming. The cognitive dissonance was agonizing. So, to resolve the pain, their brains invented a new pattern.
He spun it.
Yes. Keech suddenly received a new message saying that the sheer force of the group's prayers had convinced the aliens to spare the Earth.
Wow. So the failure of the prophecy actually became proof of their power.
Yes. They didn't abandon their beliefs. They doubled down. They started proselytizing more aggressively than ever before. They forced a pattern onto the failure to maintain their worldview and protect their egos.
We do the exact same thing with tragedy, trying to find a pattern in senseless pain. Wiseman discusses the Aberfan disaster. In 1966, in Wales, a massive mountain of coal waste collapsed and slid down a hill, burying a primary school and killing over 100 children. It was an unfathomable, horrific tragedy.
Truly heartbreaking.
Afterward, a psychiatrist named John Barker collected accounts from people across the UK who claimed to have had prophetic dreams predicting the disaster before it happened.
And reading those accounts, they sound incredibly convincing. People dreamed of coal, of children screaming, of a black mountain falling. It feels like undeniable proof of precognition. But Wiseman approaches it through the cold, hard lens of statistics and the law of large numbers.
Explain the math here because it is crucial.
Think about the population of the UK. Millions of people. Every person dreams multiple times a night. That is, billions of dreams occurring every single week. Given the sheer astronomical volume of dreams, probability dictates that by pure random chance, a small handful of those dreams are going to feature themes of collapsing buildings, mudslides, or children in danger on any given night.
Right. It's like rolling a billion dice. You're going to get a few thousand sixes in a row eventually.
Exactly. When a tragedy actually happens, the millions of people who dreamed about a sunny day at the beach forget their dreams instantly. But the 3 people who randomly dreamed of a mudslide wake up, see the news, and experience a massive psychological jolt. They link their random dream to the real-world tragedy, assuming a supernatural causal pattern.
Because the alternative, that children can die in a mudslide for absolutely no reason other than corporate negligence and gravity, is too chaotic and terrifying for the human brain to accept. We want a universe with rules, with destiny, with cosmic warnings.
And Wiseman notes that researchers have actually tested this pattern-seeking tendency in the lab.
They have.
Yes. Researchers gave participants standard visual pattern-finding tests, like finding hidden shapes within complex ink blots or noisy images. They found a direct, strong correlation. People who scored highly on finding visual patterns in meaningless data were vastly more likely to report having supernatural experiences in their daily lives.
The better your brain is at connecting random dots, the more likely you are to see a ghost.
Precisely.
So the critical observation here is monumental. We desperately assume that ultimate meaning, destiny, and cosmic justice are inherent properties of the universe. We completely ignore the fact that these are cognitive overlays. Our brains manufacture these overlays to survive the terrifying random chaos of existence.
So the final main takeaway. Our susceptibility to the supernatural is not a bug in our mental software, but a direct byproduct of the incredible pattern-matching engine that keeps our species alive.
So what does this all mean?
Well, when we look back at the entire journey of this book, from dogs at windows, to the manipulative flattery of cold reading, to the sensory crash of out-of-body experiences, to the hidden muscle movements of a seance, and finally, to the massive pattern-making engine of cults, we see a unified theory. The journey reveals that our own psychology is the ultimate wizard behind the curtain. The brain's desperate desire for meaning, its evolutionary blind spots, and its powerful unconscious networks are entirely responsible for all the magic we think exists outside of us.
Which brings me back to where we started. In the intro, we talked about the assumption that the brain is a digital camera, perfectly recording reality. Wiseman's book utterly destroys that camera, reveals a creative engine constantly hallucinating a manageable world for us to live in. And Richard Wiseman references the philosopher Martin Gardner at the very end of his book. Gardner raises a really provocative thought that I want to leave you with today.
It's a beautiful way to wrap up.
When you learn the secrets behind the magic trick, when you realize the psychic isn't talking to your dead grandmother, or the ghost in the hallway is just a magnetic suggestion, or your prophetic dream was just statistical noise, does the world become boring? Does explaining away the supernatural make reality less magical? Or is the truth actually more profound?
Think about the reality of a biological brain.
Exactly. 3 pounds of wet electrical tissue, shaped by millions of years of evolution, that is capable of inventing a ghost from shadows, dreaming the future out of statistical noise, and healing its own physical body through the sheer power of belief. Isn't that machine actually more wondrous, more staggering than any cheap psychic parlor trick?
Absolutely.
The next time you're out, we challenge you to look at the ordinary world. Look at a river flowing. Feel the gravity holding your feet to the earth. Think about the billions of neurons firing in your mind right now just to comprehend the words I am speaking. Stop looking for magic in the shadows and try to see the genuine, undeniable magic in reality. Thanks for diving deep with us. We will catch you next time.